This week on the Men at the Movies podcast, we get you ready for baseball season with The Natural. We talk about having an impact and being a ripple maker, how to respond to an assault on our hearts and identity, and the joy and power in living in who we are. Join us as we discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being. Welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and with me tonight, live, in person, breathing, here in my workspace, but appropriately distanced away for COVID, Ricky Furr. How you doing, man?
Man, thanks for having me back, Paul. I appreciate your lack of better judgment and inviting me back.
Well, you know, anytime we can do a movie from the 80s that's sort of serious, because there's parts here that aren't in this movie that aren't so serious, we have to do it. And this movie was actually originated with your idea. Well,
I just suggested we try to keep up with the sports themes as far as, you know, baseball is right around the corner. You started off with the replacements right in the middle of football season. You know, let's kind of keep up with that and kind of keep it somewhat relevant. That way it kind of, I don't know, when guys watch it, maybe they'll look back at it and strike something in their heart and kind of forget about the ball game for a little bit and think about God a little bit.
Yeah, because that's what we're all about. We're like, hey, we're going to watch this movie. It seems like it has nothing to do with your spiritual life. And we're going to say, wait, no, there's this code. There's a, you know, it's like in the Cracker Jacks or what was that orange drink? It wasn't Tang. Ovaltine. That was the drink. The Ovaltine secret code.
Oh, that was chocolate milk, not orange.
Same difference. You mix them together. It's a chocolate covered orange. It was delicious.
Never tried that. Now I feel a little bad for not trying it.
I'm not sure that would be a wise thing.
It's worth a shot. Try anything once.
So when I suggested this movie, you had never seen it.
No. So I had, I don't know, a list of 5, 6, 7 movies and was going to throw it out after I got your feedback as far as keeping up with, you know, sports seasons, and you threw out The Natural and I was like, oh, that wasn't on my list.
What was on your list?
Field of Dreams. You know, I think that would be kind of a easy one.
By the way, I haven't seen that one.
Some stupid ones like Major League. I don't know. I got a list at work. I can get back to you on that one. But
Major League's probably the replacements of baseball movies.
Yeah, probably. Like, we might have to search really hard to find God in some of those. But
yeah, that one may not make the cut. That one may just be like cotton candy of movies. Not a lot of deeper meaning.
No, but there's some great one-liners, so we'll take that.
So, your first experience with The Natural, how was it?
Well, okay, so you text me back, and you're like, how about The Natural? And I'm like, fantastic. I've never seen it. So there's a couple guys at work that are huge movie buffs. You can throw out some random movie, obscure, doesn't matter, and they'll both go back and forth. One guy had never seen it. The other guy looked at me like I was an idiot for never watching it. He was like, no, he was like, you love Robert Redford. Why? How have you not seen this? Never heard of it. He was like, no, like, you're a baseball fan. I was like, no, I'm a Braves fan. I really don't care about baseball, but I love my Braves.
Yeah.
He was like, you still need to watch it. Trust me. He was like, there's an underlying story. And like, even he could tell that like there was an underlying story within the movie that I had to see.
Yeah. So it's a great movie. It's from 1984. It's got all those characters. It seems like half of Hollywood, according to the trailer, was in this movie. And that's only probably the headliners. Lots of familiar faces. Yeah, it's dated. I think let's see, I think it takes place in the 20s.
That would be about right, because the Whammer,
Yeah.
loosely based off Babe Ruth.
It's pretty spot on. He calls his shot, and
Well, it doesn't come out and say it for obvious reasons, but yeah, like, it doesn't take a whole lot to figure out who that is.
they're a little more respectful of historical figures back in the 80s, I guess. They didn't want to come right out. There was a trademark maybe on Babe Ruth. Who knows? So the movie starts. We see an older Robert Redford sitting there on at a train station. The train goes by, and then he's gone, and it takes us back into his past. And you see a boy playing catch with his dad, and it's showing you've got a lot of great memories of a father and son playing baseball, father speaking life and encouragement and identity into his son. And, you know, he knows what makes his son come alive, and it's baseball. But he tells him, he says, Roy, you have a gift, but if you rely too much on it, you'll fail. And another one of the quotes that I've heard somewhere, and I don't know who said it, but it's, our gifting will take us farther than our character can keep us. And I'm not sure who to attribute it. It's not my own, genius coming out, but that's true. Is we're gifted, and we'll find our gifting will take us places, but if we don't have the character and the foundation and the integrity behind it, as Roy will come to find out through this movie, we're going to head downhill real quick.
And yeah, you're right. When the movie starts and you've got Roy playing ball with his dad, like, it immediately struck a chord with me. I'm like, man, Christos was right. Like, I should have watched this movie. My dad coached me in all the sports I played growing up until high school, and just to see that, and whenever he said, you have a gift, paraphrased, but don't rely on yourself, that's a lot of the same, I guess, terminology my dad passed down to me. And, of course, whenever you're 10, 12 years old, it makes absolutely no sense, because
you're 10 or 12 years old, you have no context.
You're like, no, if I'm good at this, I'm good at this. But it was more of mastering the craft, learn the craft, always try to improve. So fast forward a few decades, then it makes a lot more sense. So, and it was great, because there was nothing but encouragement out of that 5 minutes his dad was on the screen, and proud. And that was like an immediate God type thing, like looking at that, like, he just threw the baseball and knocked a hole in the barn. His dad's excited about it.
Yeah. I'd have been like, you son of a, you're going to fix this barn.
True story. And that's the difference between his dad and my dad, because I would have been fixing it.
After you got your butt whooped.
True story.
So Roy's dad doesn't last long on the screen, and he dies of an apparent heart attack there. And at some point, very shortly after, lightning hits a giant oak tree.
It was actually the same tree his dad died under.
And throughout this movie, you'll see lightning appear at critical moments in Roy's life. So it hits the tree, splits the tree, and Roy, again, holding on to the identity that his dad passed down to him, made a bat out of the wood of that tree, carved in a lightning bolt, and carved in, wood burned in, whatever you want to call it, Wonder Boy.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the coolest bats I'd ever seen. Granted, whenever, fast forward, spoiler alert, he gets to the majors, probably not the coolest bat to have whenever you're up there trying to swing and Wonder Boy's on it, but
yeah,
the fact that he was carrying his father with him, and I think that that's something that he definitely felt like he was doing. He didn't care. He had a special case just to carry the bat.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Now every travel league has a case that somebody paid way too much for a bat. So
fast forward a few years, and Roy gets called up to the majors. He's going to go do a tryout for the Cubs. He's appears to be probably late teens, maybe early 20s.
I'm thinking early 20s.
He's he sees Iris, who's played by Glenn Close, who we will talk more about what an amazing woman she is. But in this case, he says, you know, I'll send for you. I've never been on a train before. He is young and naive, and his heart is pure and innocent in a lot of ways.
He's chasing the wild goose, and like he gets on the train and he's like, I've never been on the train before. And that shows you, if you follow after God, he's going to take you places that you've never imagined he could have. He was the son of a farmer and thought he was going to grow up being a farmer. He played baseball for fun. You know, he still thought that was part of his identity, but he just picked up and filled in his dad's shoes and did what he thought he had to do. And now he's on a train, and I don't know, he's probably just as lost as half of us are whenever we're like, okay, I'm going to follow after God. And then what am I doing? I don't know.
And what you see is what happens actually to a lot of young, new Christians is they become passionate for Christ, and they see him working in their life and transforming. And then they get on a train following his call, following, their gifting in a lot of ways, the gifts that God gave us. And they get sidetracked. They get taken out. And because there's a woman played by Barbara Hershey, her name's Harriet, and she shows up on the train, and it's very subtle the way that she gets introduced. First, Max, who's a sports writer, and the Whammer, they're talking, they're meeting on the plane, they're reading the paper. And two top athletes have recently been killed, and both killed with a silver bullet. And so while Max is reading this, Whammer is making eyes at Harriet, and they end up taking a break because trains do, I guess. I've never ridden on a train cross country like that. And she goes and she's watching, Whammer goes to the batting cage and he's wowing all the fans and all this. And she asks, is he the best? And that's Max says, yeah, he's the best there ever is, the best there ever will be, because she's looking to take out the best. She, as we find out, she's the one with the silver bullets who's been killing these top athletes. But that question, and throughout this movie, there are people that Roy will face who come to steal, kill, and destroy, as our enemy does. And it reminds me of this, one of my favorite quotes from John Eldredge, who says in Waking the Dead, "The story of your life is the story of the long and brutal assault on your heart by the one who knows what you could be and fears it." And throughout this movie, that's what we see, is this assault on Roy's heart, on his identity, on who he is, on who God has called him to be.
Yeah, and it's sad because the assault's coming from so many different directions, and I think more importantly, it's coming from a handful of people that he actually trusts. And I think as we go through life, there's a lot of people who seem like they have our best intentions in the forefront, and actuality, they're just using it against us. And I think this movie's a really good example of that. Just if we're going back through, if somebody seems like they show interest in who we are, what we can do, where we seem to be going, they want to take us out. Like, they want to go along for the ride, and then as soon as they can, jump off the ride.
Right. And we're not saying, it reminds me of the line in The Lord of the Rings, where the hobbits meet Aragorn, and he talks about basically saying that what seems fair may actually be foul, and all that's foul may be fair. In a sense that Aragorn, Strider, when they meet him, he looks rough. He's got a rough reputation. There's some doubt on, oh, don't you be messing with that Strider guy. Don't you know? Because we go to like Canadian or Wisconsin or Dakota don't mess with that Strider guy, don't you know? But it's all that seems foul may be fair, and you have to, as the Bible says, you will know them by their fruits. And so you can't live your life sort of closed off, not giving yourself to people, not trusting them, because you're always worried about how they're going to take advantage of you. But at the same time, we're supposed to be on our guard. We're supposed to be, sly as a serpent, but innocent as a lamb, as a dove, as we navigate this enemy territory of the world that we live in. So they have this contest right before they get back on the train where this guy bets Whammer and Max. He said, my boy Roy will strike out the Whammer in 3 pitches. Again, he's the best hitter in the major leagues at this time in the 20s. And so, of course, he takes him on, and Harriet is watching, and she's, enamored, watching, waiting for the farm boy to get taken deep. And it doesn't happen. Roy strikes out Whammer on 3 straight pitches, 3 straight strikes. And her attention immediately shifts from Whammer to Roy.
Yeah, it was amazing because when they were on the train and he just went up and introduced himself to Whammer.
Yeah.
Him and Max just pretty much brushed him off like he was nothing. And then this guy that just found him playing on the weekends in a summer league.
Yeah.
Was like, no, he's the real deal. Like, I'll put money on him. 3 straight pitches, 3 strikes, you're gone. First pitch whizzes by him, and Whammer's like, okay,
this is for real.
Okay. To even start, he's just like, don't you want to warm up? And he's like, no, my arm's warm. And Whammer just automatically thinks this is going to be the easiest 1 pitch.
Right.
And I'm done. And second pitch, he tries to swing, and he's nowhere close to it. And I think that's huge because that's, if God's called you to be someone, to walk into something, when you're walking in that, he's pitching with no fear. He has nothing to lose. It's not his money on the line. He actually tells the guy, are you sure you want to do this?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah. And, sometimes we need that boost of confidence to actually say, I guess, an external boost of confidence.
Yeah.
That, yeah, you can do this. You're fine. I have full faith in you.
Well, and to Roy, it says, oh, wait, I can hang in the big leagues.
Exactly.
I belong here.
Well, he had told Iris earlier that, it's just a tryout. I don't know what's going to happen from it. So
I'll probably be back next week.
Yeah. So even before he gets to go try out for the Cubs, he doesn't even have the confidence in himself. He doesn't realize how good he actually is.
So he strikes out Whammer. He gets Harriet's attention. And Harriet, as I think the enemy likes to do to our lives, starts whispering sweet nothings in our ear.
Homer lived ages ago and wrote about heroes and gods. Oh. And he would have had it in mind to write about baseball had he seen you out there today.
You know what, someday? I'm gonna break every record in the book. I know I got it in me.
And what will you hope to accomplish?
When I walk down the street, people look at me and say, there goes Roy Hobbs, the best there ever was.
Is that all?
Well, what else is there?
Don't you know? Isn't there something more?
More?
More glorious?
Yeah, I think whenever I was watching that, I didn't realize how seductive her voice was during that whole scene.
Well, and it's crazy because immediately after that, they go through a tunnel or something. It gets all dark, and then she just walks away and leaves him hanging.
Yeah, and what did I say wrong? But I love what else is there? Because it's the whole, he's literally just doing it for the love of the game. His dad spoke into him, his father spoke into him this, and that's all he's focused on. He's not focused on, well, I don't know. I guess I shouldn't say that because, he wants people to notice him as he's going down. So I guess that is kind of
it's almost like knowing him for who he is the baseball player. And what she's doing, just like
good.
Satan
I didn't think about that.
in the garden, she's filling his head with ideas of heroes and gods. It's like Homer wrote about heroes and gods, and if he were to see your performance, he would write about you.
Oh, yeah, because she was like, oh, didn't you read Homer? Who's that?
The only Homer I know involves running around the bases. I don't know. Somehow he ended up with a Southern accent. But
it was Midwest Southern. It's all kind of the same thing.
Yeah, basically. So he ends up getting to Chicago, and it's interesting because He wants to go straight to the ball field. But the guy he's with says, no, I got to go to the hotel. The guy he's with has a penchant for the drink, as it were. He's a known drunkie, I guess. And so he ends up at the hotel. Harriet calls him. He goes to her room where she is there in some black lingerie and holding a gun that just happens to have a silver bullet in it.
I didn't know you were staying here.
How do you know where I was staying? And she shoots him in the gut. And then the screen goes black and it says 16 years later. So Roy disappears. And this is the 20s. There's barely long distance. There's no email. There's no, not much radio. There's no missing persons where, Iris can say, where did Roy go? She just knew he left to Chicago and never came back.
It's great because you see the 16 years later, and my first thought was, what the hell? How are you not going to fill me in on what just happened? Like, did he get accused of it? What happened to Harriet? Like, did she just run out of the hotel and escape? And did Roy die? Like,
so many questions.
Yes. So it picks up and there's a random Major League Baseball game going on. And then you just see this random guy walking down the hallway towards the dugout.
I apologize for the dogs. They are outside barking, and I hope maybe the mics won't pick them up. And if they don't, then I'll just cut this piece out. And if not, then my bad.
So you've got the manager, Pops.
Wilford Brimley.
Sitting there.
I should have been a farmer.
Exactly.
Because his team sucks.
Shortstop can't ground a freaking ground ball. Pop flies, you're standing 2 feet to the left and dropping it, and you don't understand. Like, you just think he's a manager, that he's just trying to coach his players up, and you don't realize what he's got on the line quite yet.
Yeah.
And then Hobbs walks in, and Pops is just like, who are you? Like, why are you in my dugout?
Yeah. He thinks he's a scout or something like that, because by now he's at least in his mid to late 30s, judging but from the math, and completely dismissed because, and this is where we begin to discover, there is a tug of war going on, because Pop is not just the manager of the team. He is also part owner, and his future with the team is based on how this season goes. If the team wins the pennant, the other guy, his partner, who is not really his partner, but his partner, the judge, is actively working against him, because if they don't win the pennant, the judge gets all of the stake in the team. He becomes a full owner. But if they win the pennant, then Pop gets the team back. And so this is a high stakes game. And when he sees Roy come up, this older guy who he's never heard of, doesn't know anything about, he thinks that this guy is another stooge sent from the judge to screw up his season, to screw up his team, and ruin any chance he has of continuing this game he loves, because Pop's mom told him to be a farmer, but he's not a farmer. He has spent, as Red will say, he's spent his life to the game. He's given everything to the game because he loves the game of baseball.
I was trying not to give all the spoiler alerts immediately. I was going to try to
we got to keep this shorter than the movie, though, so we got to move this along.
Denied. So it's great because he comes in and Roy's like, so-and-so sent me. He signed me to such and such contract for 1 season, and he can't do that, blah, blah, blah. And Red pulls him off to the side and was like, Pops, you told him that he could do that. If he sees somebody with talent, yeah, he can sign him to a contract. So Pops is like, okay, yep, you're right, finally concedes. But you're going to ride the bench. You can be on the team, but
not even ride the bench. He doesn't even practice. Like, they go to bat in practice, and he doesn't get a shot. He doesn't get a swing. He gets nothing.
Well, he's old like us, and he doesn't want to hurt him.
Yeah, if I swing a bat right now, I might not get up for a week. So the story advances through weeks of ineptitude by the team. Pop refuses to even, like I said, let Roy practice.
Even has a motivational speaker talking about how disease
Losing is like a boat.
Losing is a disease. Right. I love that guy. I could listen to him talk and make fun of him all day, but I would love to listen to him talk.
And so Roy, it's again, because it's garbage. And Roy leaves, and that makes Pop mad. And he's like, you, blah, 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 you're off this team. He's like, you never gave me a chance.
Yeah, he's going to send him back down to the minors. And he was like, you never even gave me a chance. And he's batting practice tomorrow. And he was like, I've been here every day.
Yeah, I love that line. He's like, be there at batting practice. And Roy's like, every day. I've been there every day.
You haven't given me the chance. So that's on you, not on me.
Because he had told Red early on, they had gone out for dinner because Red was trying to figure out who Roy was. And Red's explaining Pop's backstory that I summed up earlier. And what Roy says, if you give me a chance to play, I've been waiting a long time for this. If I get the chance to play, I'll give you the best that I got.
That's all God asked for.
Yeah.
Some days we might only be able to give him 50% because of everything else we got going on. But that's it. But that's what he promises him. And that's huge. Yeah,
my mom, don't shout out my mom very often in the podcast because it's Men at the Movies. And, my mom's not a Men at the Movie. So, but she asked me something one day when I was frustrated, probably about the kids or something. And she said, are you doing the best you can? I was like, well, yeah.
God, I love me some good mom advice. Not even going to lie.
My mom will also say the grass is always greener over the septic tank. So you got to pick and just like Roy needed to pick and choose who he trusted. You need to pick and choose which mom advice you listen to.
Sad part is it makes sense. So I'm not even mad at her.
Yeah. But she said, are you doing the best you can? Can you do better than your best? And yeah, we might get frustrated with the outcome. We might get frustrated that we can't do more or have more time or more energy or more whatever. That whole thing is, am I enough? The question that every man actually sort of has in their core.
The sad part is I think sometimes we set our standard higher than what God sets our standard because he knows our limitations.
Right.
And we're just like, I could do...
Why can't I dunk the basketball?
Yeah.
Because you're 6.
Or you're 4'3". But, it's sad. I think sometimes we set our standard a lot higher than what God has our standard for. Like, we're setting our standard to what God has for the end goal, not for the step for today. And I think that's...
be like yelling at your 1-year-old that they fell after one step.
Buddy of mine, the same one that told me to watch this movie, his son took his first step today, so that is actually fantastic.
And did he yell at him for not running a marathon?
No, actually, he yelled at his fiance for not videotaping it while he was at work so he could watch it. So
that's understandable, I
but
guess.
it was kind of awesome.
Although the first step is always sort of a, oh my gosh, that just happened.
True story.
But it's that mindset of, as a child of God, we somehow expect that we should be running marathons and, taking a village, if we're a warrior mentality and doing all this amazing things. And it's just like, hey, how about you learn to walk?
Yeah. Instead of preaching to the thousands, how about you just talk to the person right beside of you and go through that? They just, I don't know. I think sometimes we set our purpose. We see the end goal.
Yeah.
And not just, okay.
That idea of, what do you have?
Well, you got to prepare me for it. You got to prep me. So what does that look like? What am I supposed to do today? And we just try to jump both feet completely in, all in, and we're not ready yet.
It's the kid with the 2 loaves and the 5 fish. He could say, I don't have enough to feed these people. I'm just going to eat my lunch here in peace because I was smart enough to bring my own food. And instead what he did was like, I don't have enough, but you can have what I do have.
And then the son takes it and
probably with a wink and a smile and a hug or a pat on the head, he's like, that'll do.
Yeah, I think a few years ago, I actually had my men's group on Wednesday night. We were meeting right before Easter, and I was like, so, it's not exactly there yet, but God's still there with the disciples. Jesus is still there with them. What do you think that conversation was like? Because he knew what the next week was going to hold, but they were just sitting around cutting up. His life was definitely focused on ministry, but unfortunately, I think even as much as the Bible gives us as far as the 12, it misses a lot of the just random conversations that they had with Christ.
Sitting over the campfire as they're, doing the 3-day journey from one place to another. It's just, he didn't teleport from one town to the next. There was a lot of walking and a lot of hanging out.
And, I think there was a lot of conversation on the side as far as, did you really just see him take those fish and those loaves and feed all those people? How did that, you were there, you saw that, right? I didn't imagine that, right?
Was there a bunch of kids with these loaves and fish? Where did that come from?
I only remember seeing one. How many did you see? Where did he, that just happened, right?
Nothing like a miracle to blow your mind. And so finally, as he says, show up for batting practice. I've been there every day. So he shows up. He crushes the ball to the point where, let me see that bat, measure it, cork it. Let's see if it's, whatever, test it. Is it the official measurements? Because everybody thinks it's the bat. It's not his gift.
100%. It's cork centered. It's not a solid wood bat.
It can't be legal. It's probably some fancy metal that hasn't been invented yet in the 30s. And so they start winning, and he inspires people. He inspires the bat boy. That was an awesome moment when he's like, hey, I like your bat. He's some dorky little 13, 15-year-old or something. And what he said, he asked him if they could make one or if he could do a bat like that. And Roy says, we'll go find some wood down at the lumber yard and we can do it together.
But see, that was great because he's inviting him to his bigger story.
Right.
And I love that because since you already ruined something later, the boy actually brings him a bat from later, and it never tells you whether they worked on that bat together or if the boy just did it on his own. But the look on his face whenever Hobbs grabbed that bat, he was just like, this is the one.
Yeah. And
it was definitely different than everybody else's bat.
You are really jumping to the end.
Well, I'm just going ahead and tell you ruin stuff. I'm going to ruin stuff. That's how this works.
It's a what is it, 35-year-old movie? Spoiler alerts have expired.
That's fair.
I mean, it's been used in ESPN commercials, and the ESPN commercials are probably over a decade old.
But it's great whenever he gets into that first game because he swings the first time and he doesn't hit the ball. And Pops is like, yep, told you guys, it's all over. At least that's the look on his face. And then that storm rolls in, and like you were talking about,
because he told him hit the cover off the ball.
And that's exactly what he does. And then everybody is in shock. Like, that's not a ball. It's, the cover's over here. The strings spread out everywhere. And they literally stopped the game for 10 minutes trying to argue over whether that actually happened or not. Because, other than Sandlot, that was one of the movies on my list.
We could do that sometime.
Nobody had seen that before. Well, I guess still before Sandlot, so I guess you're still okay.
We're still in the 30s, so that's pretty new. They're like, what's wrong with there's something wrong with the ball. There's something wrong with the bat. And Roy's just like, I just went out and hit it as hard as I could.
Yeah, and he ended up getting a triple, and everybody that was on base obviously come home, and, they end up winning the game, and they're just like, okay, maybe this old timer knows what he's doing. Maybe maybe we missed out on something because, before, whenever he come into the dugout originally, he gets his uniform, the game's over, and everybody's like, oh, this must be a new scouting guy. But and then a handful of others are like, oh, so this is what our great scouting team has actually found us, a washed up 39-year-old ball player that shouldn't even be out here with us.
Well, and the funny thing was, there in a later phone call, that was actually what they were doing. They were trying to find crap players to put on the team so that they would lose. And it just so happened that this nobody from Nowheresville was Roy freaking Hobbs, who couldn't pitch anymore, but he could still lay the wood down, as they say.
And he was a great outfielder.
Yeah. So we shift ahead. They go on a winning streak. They're in the chase for the pennant, and Judge decides, the silent owner that you kind of just get reference to, but don't actually see. Well, Roy actually gets to go and meet the Judge in a scene that truly feels like an encounter with the enemy.
Please pardon the absence of light. You see, as a youngster, I was frightened of the dark, and I used to wake up sobbing in it as if it was water, and I was drowning in it. But as you will observe, I have so thoroughly disciplined myself against that fear that now I much prefer a dark room.
The only thing I know about the dark is you can't see in it.
A pure canard.
What's a canard?
A prevarication.
What does that mean?
A lie. You can see, you know.
Well, not good enough.
You see me, don't you?
Maybe I do, maybe I don't.
I asked you here because I wanted to pay you my compliments for your performance in the field.
It's been fun.
No, you made a great contribution. Stands have been constantly filled. Financial fortunes have been radically reversed since you joined the organization.
I hadn't noticed.
You're not fascinated by the almighty dollar?
I never gave it much thought.
You're above such mundane thoughts, huh?
I didn't say that.
Oh.
No, I'm as interested in a buck as anybody else.
And I am not one to let good deeds go unrewarded. Would a new contract interest you?
Yeah.
For more money?
You want to pay me more money, that's up to you.
I don't detect any gratitude on your part, Mr. Hobbs. You know I'm under no legal obligation to pay you 1 penny more.
Either way, I play to win.
A young man your age, you ought to be thinking about your future.
Well, let me put it to you this way. There's no way I'm going to let you steal this club from Pop.
The fact is, Pop Fisher is a jinxed man, and not you and all the Roy Hobbs in the world are going to change that.
Well, it'll be a team effort.
You're a very impudent man, Mr. Hobbs.
And then on his way out, Roy flips the light on. And is like, turn the light off, Because what is in the dark likes to stay in the dark.
I love how the enemy tried to fight him on his own territory. And the entire time, Hobbs refused.
Kept deflecting.
Yeah.
First, he's like, I strengthened myself to avoid, so now I welcome what once scared me. He's like, okay, you can't see. He's like, using the big words, and Roy's just like, I don't know what that's. Stop.
Yeah, trying to make it sound like he was better than Hobbs.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, it's the enemy probing the perimeter. Where are your weaknesses? Where can I get in? Aren't you interested in a buck? Oh, you're above the mighty dollar.
Not saying I'm against it, but
you want to pay me more money.
That's up to you. Yeah.
And what he wanted was somebody who was, oh, thank you. I'd love some money. I've been working. He's an old guy. And he said, you've got to take a look beyond this season. You've got to look beyond baseball.
But he didn't realize where Hobbs come from. His dad was a farmer. He wasn't making a whole lot of money. Like, he was good with just the bare essentials. And
because who was Roy Hobbs at his core identity? He loved baseball. He was a baseball player.
And that was it. Like he was completely happy with that. If he had to go back to the fields, no harm, no foul. 6 months ago, that's exactly where I was at, and I was okay.
Yeah, there's another quote that I can't remember who said it.
You're really good at that. Congratulations.
Yeah, I really should make this mark down, but it talks about how once a man has gone through the first death, the death of our false self, the death of our sin nature, as it were, we are no longer afraid of the second death. Because, like, what are you going to do to me? I've died already. What are you going to do to me? I've lost baseball for 16 years. This is a chance I never thought I'd have. You want to pay me more? Great. But I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to, with the shot that I've got.
I love the fact that whenever Hobbs started to walk out of the room, he cut the light on because he was like, I'm not going to let you fool me. Unfortunately, Hobbs walked out and didn't see the other enemies that were sneaking up behind him for the sneak attack.
Gus, who's a bookie who was making a lot of money by betting against the Knights. That was their pro team, I guess the New York Knights. And he made a habit of betting against Roy. And when Roy went on a hitting streak and the Knights went on a winning streak, he was losing money. And he tried to manipulate the market. And yet he falls prey to the seduction of Memo, who's played by Kim Basinger. And she is, weirdly enough, Pop's niece, the manager's niece, Pop Fisher, who, Wilford Brimley, she plays her niece. And even that first night, he comes back to the hotel with her, and he sees her as like, she's bad luck. And Roy's like, that's a bad way to talk about your niece. He's like, I just know that guys who are with her tend to run into bad luck. And so what happens?
Yeah, I think at this time he didn't realize that she was in with the judge and kind of in on, hey, if you want to stay in this sugar pocket, you're going to do exactly what I want you to do, and kind of making her use her God-given gifts for evil.
Yeah. Because she was searching for a way out of her life. She was searching for a rescue. She was searching for someone to save her from herself, however that took. She wasn't interested in Roy Hobbs, the person, or Roy Hobbs, the baseball player. She was looking for Roy Hobbs, the guy who could take her out of the situation she was in, and they could run away. And again, this comes up a little bit later, but he was the rescuer, and she only cared about what he could do for her.
But let's be honest, how many times have we looked for the quick way out? Not the right way, just how can I get out of this situation right now?
Right. Or how can I lay for myself up treasures on earth? How can, because through the court, he's offered a big contract. He gets offered money to lay down and let the Knights lose. But the man that he is, as he's gone through all these trials, doesn't allow him to.
Well, at this point in his life, he thought that baseball was over. He went back to not the minors, he's playing baseball at some rinky-dink, club team, just so he can fulfill just doing what he loves, not even fulfilling anything, just enjoying it. Now he gets the chance. He doesn't want to ruin it, at least at this point.
As he follows Memo, he loses his focus on baseball. He starts thinking of a life beyond baseball.
Exactly.
And saying, okay, well, I'm focused on Memo. I'm focused on what I can get after this. And his play sucks. He starts striking out. He starts playing poorly. The team starts losing again until they end up back in Chicago, where we see a couple scenes where Iris hears about him as he's winning. She hears in the paper Roy Hobbs has reappeared after 16 years of Nowheresville. She ends up in the crowd, this iconic scene where she stands up and everybody else is sitting down. Everybody's like, sit down. And the sun's coming through and she's an angel of light that he sees.
She's actually wearing all white in the scene, so that's perfect.
Yeah. And he then cranks a homer.
3-run homer, actually.
They win the game. I can't remember how they arrange it, but they end up sitting down and having a date, the soda shop together, because that's what happened in the 30s, I guess.
You know, it's great because God kind of nudged him back into his story.
Yes.
And then he tries to go up and, you know, did I just see who I thought I saw?
Yeah.
Because, you know, he had 2 strikes. He backed out, kind of looked over his shoulder and saw her, and he's like, is that really her?
Yeah.
And smashes 3-run homer. They end up winning. And then after the game, there's so many paparazzi media type people flashing, like he can't see back up in the stage.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And then, and they get to go catch up at the diner, her local watering hole, so to speak.
But I love how, like you mentioned, Roy had found his identity, but then got distracted again, as men tend to do with women. We sort of give up what our God-given gifts are and start pursuing a more comfortable life.
It was good because it was actually a away game. So like his distractions that were at his home field were no longer there. He kind of, I don't know, zeroed out, just kind of blanked, where he could actually think, breathe, see better.
And what happened was, as we saw in the Rocky series, Adrian consistently reminded Rocky of who he was. And Memo was distracting Roy from that. But Iris, which, by the way, Iris is a part of your eye. It's what you see through. Iris, through this movie from here on, to me, is a sign of the Holy Spirit and of how our restoration and our transformation we are invited to it. And I just thought it was so clever, because they were meeting in the soda shop, and he asks, and she asks him, you know, what happened? What happened to you, Roy? And he says, my life didn't turn out the way I expected. And as soon as he says that, it's almost like, okay, that's all I needed right now. I got to go.
Yeah. He starts to open up his heart and actually, hey, okay, I'm going to invite you in. What do you mean you're leaving? Like,
right. Like, I just said this. Now you're leaving, because she knows what he can handle. And God knows what we can handle. And we think, oh, we need this flooding torrent of emotion and purging but that's not how it works. You know, there is a moment of salvation where everything's transformed, but it's a process. And God is restoring our hearts. You know, he talks about healing our broken hearts, but it's a piece at a time.
Yeah, I think Tozer worded, I'm going to pull up all and butcher some of this. If you don't chase after God after you're saved, are you really saved?
Yeah.
Because if you're not constantly trying to have that interaction back and forth with him, then whenever you said you accepted Christ, is it true?
Yeah.
And I think that this was kind of a get back to, like, he had kind of gotten off the path. Yeah. And this conversation was almost an awakening of, okay, my life didn't turn out to how I expected. Well, what did I expect versus where I'm at now? What could I have changed?
Well, I think in this case, the next question becomes, as he'll answer the next, because he goes out and pursues her. He's like, come to the next game. I need to see you. And so the question becomes, okay, admitting my life isn't what I thought it would be. And then the next question is, well, what happened? It says same initial question. What happened to you? He didn't answer what happened to him.
He was definitely chasing the wild goose, so to speak. But sometimes down the line, we get sidetracked. We see something off the beaten path and we think that it's what we're supposed to chase.
Squirrel.
True story. Every day. And then, you know, this was just kind of his marker getting him back to the path that he was supposed to be on.
And as he says, I lost my confidence. she tells him about her son. And so, and again, as he shares his story with her, this is something that you and I have come to know, because so many times as believers, as followers of Jesus, we think God came to redeem my sin. He saved me from my sin.
He came to save us, not the sin.
Right. But we give him our sin, but we don't give him our story.
True story. True story.
And
okay.
what Roy
now I'm
does,
on the same page with you.
What Roy does, he gives Iris his story. Well, here's what happened that day I left. And goes through, I spent years in the hospital. I've been bouncing around from different town to different town. I couldn't really play. I was injured, all this stuff. And then I got this shot. And she sits with him through it. She listens to it. She doesn't judge him. She says, I looked for you in places. And then one day I just stopped looking. And then he appeared. And as we'll come to find out, and I just thought the way the story revealed about the son and who he was, and he says, oh, is his father around? No, he lives in New York. And Roy's still not that bright a dude.
It was
no
funny.
question. How old is this boy?
Yeah.
About 16.
I actually watched this with my wife, and she was like, oh my God, he is so dense. Like he has no clue what is going on.
And you said, what's going on? I don't understand.
No. She was like, does he not realize that that's not his son? And I'm watching this the same time you are. Like, yeah. Trust me, I understand how oblivious he is right now.
Yeah. After this experience with Iris, he gets his groove back. They're on this road trip, so he's avoided the negative influence of Memo and Gus and the judge and Max, the sports writer. And skimming through, they get back into the pennant race. They're tied for the lead.
Which was great, because when you start to walk in who you're supposed to be, the people around you start to feed off that.
Yes.
And the entire team started to feed off that. One of the team members, I forgot his name, saw the lightning bolt. And he was like, that reminds me of my dad. He served in the service, blah, blah, blah. And you could see Hobbs, he kind of pulled back, because all of a sudden that's a little bit of vulnerability for him, because all of a sudden somebody's starting to make a connection to his dad. And all of a sudden it's awesome, because you see the next scenes, all the team players lined up and they all have the lightning bolts.
Right.
And only two of them, well, one knows that it's from his dad because he's served in the service. One, it just reminds him of that. But the other ones are like, oh, this is good luck. This is working.
Worked for him. Might as well try it.
We're all going to roll with it.
And he rallied the men around him.
Exactly.
And not through any big rah-rah speech, but just being who he was and being authentic and doing his best, basically.
But the opposite's also correct. If we do not walk closely to who Christ has called us to be, everything will start falling apart, not only for us, but for the people who are around us who look up to us. And I think that's kind of important, because if he would have continued that slump, the entire team was riding with him, and they rode up and kind of clung on to who his identity was. But if he would have stayed in that slump, they would have just continued to slide and wouldn't have been anywhere close to the pennant race. Right.
Pop would have lost the team, Judge would have won, and misery all around. So we end up back. They get back to town. They're throwing a victory party, and there's a couple scenes that I'm not going to play, but there's a scene with Gus and Roy where he says fame isn't enough. He's trying to tell him to pursue Memo, that fame isn't enough. You have to do things to protect yourself. You have to pursue her. You can't build on what you didn't get. And, they're talking about the next game. And he's like, I wouldn't bet against us. And Gus says, you're missing the point. I already have. And the enemy has already bet against us. He bets that we'll fail. He'll bet that we'll lose, because when he's right, then that's his piece of it's almost like a boulder hanging over our head that he can smash us with.
Oh yeah, because he can pull that back any time from that point on. Remember this time when I beat you?
Yep.
And I mean, that's a perfect example of it.
Because Roy would have given it up.
Exactly.
And he would have said, no, I was a baseball player. That is who I was. That is who my dad named me. And we are going to play that clip in a little bit. And what everything is saying is, no, you've got to take care of yourself. And to do that, you've got to give up who God made you. You've got to give up. You've got to not play. You've got to not hit the ball. And I'm not sure what happens at this party. I don't know if he gets poisoned or what. He ends up in the hospital.
I'm saying that chick poisoned him, and I hate her.
It's all one big crony situation where she's working with Judge and with Gus. I'm not sure Max is involved directly, but he's kind of an evil guy who's only in it for himself as well, the sports writer. And
well, Gus pretty much comes up to her and tells her to take care of the situation. They're at a
gives
dinner,
him
and she just gives
yeah.
him something. It's not clear what it is, but he gets really, really sick
Yep.
shortly thereafter. So
they take a silver bullet out of his stomach, which has been sitting in there for, I guess, 16 years. Memo visits him and says, you're not going to play, right? Think of what you're giving up. If you don't play, Gus is going to give us money and we'll have a home. We'll have a future. We'll have a way out of here.
which is great, because if we don't get rid of that silver bullet that's in us, at some point in time, it's going to come back up. We've got to deal with whatever ails us, whatever's been in our past, whatever we're hiding, we don't want to admit, or it's going to end up eventually 16 years later, 5 months, whatever, bring us down.
And I think that topic comes up when Iris comes. So Iris comes, he's still in the hospital. The judges come, he says, I'll give you money. Roy's like, I don't want it. Okay, well, if you play, I'm going to show these pictures of this you shot in a hotel room and this scantily clad woman who's jumped out the window.
Who was Harriet, who shot him originally.
Right. And he's like, oh, sure, it was suicide. He's like, I don't care. How is this going to look?
In the 20s, you're not going to be able to prove that.
Yeah. And the shame, again, the clubbing over the shame of previous mistakes, of things we can't avoid, things that we wish never happened. And he's sitting there wondering what to do. They have a 1-game playoff. And Roy's faced with the decision, do I play or do I not? Playing might kill me, because in this medical jargon, if you play, your stomach could blow up and you die. That's their New York medical accents.
It's pretty accurate.
Thanks. And then Iris comes up, because she brought her son to town. She shows up, her son's not there. And so they have this conversation sitting on the bed where he talks about, well, how did you get here?
Doc says I have to quit baseball.
Why?
Some mistakes I guess we never stopped paying for. I didn't even know her.
The girl on the train. You liked her, didn't you?
Yes. But I didn't see it coming.
How could you possibly know she'd hurt you? I mean, how could anyone?
I didn't see it coming.
You think you should have?
Yes. But I didn't. Why didn't I?
You were so young.
Things sure turned out different.
In what way?
Different. For 16 years, I've lived with the idea that I could have been the best in the game.
You're so good now.
I could have been better. I could have broke every record in the book.
And then?
And then when I walked down the street, people would have looked and they would have said, there goes Roy Hobbs, the best there ever was in this game.
You know, I believe we have 2 lives.
What do you mean?
The life we learn with, and the life we live with after that. With or without the records, they'll remember you. Think of all those young boys you've influenced. There's so many of them.
That day in Chicago, why did you stand up?
I didn't want to see you fail.
I wish Dad could. God, I love baseball.
I think that's huge because kind of like what we were saying, as far as we think we see our purpose at the end game, but we don't see all the impact we make along the way. And he thinks that all these people are going to walk down the street and say he's the best there was, the best there ever will be, but he doesn't see the two people that are going to say that at the end of the movie. And I think that her words, the life we learn with and the life we live with after that. Yeah. Like that's like, we're going to make mistakes, but how are we going to learn and what are we going to change after we make that distinction?
And it's in this moment, you know, and I just love it. And again, it calls back to that conversation with Harriet. What do you dream of? What do you, and he says the same things. And her response isn't sort of this ridicule or this mocking or that's it. It's like you've missed it. People will remember you. Bobby, the bat boy, is going to remember you. The people, there's a scene where he's interacting with the kids and inspiring them, his teammates. And he may not break records. And this is one thing that I try to teach my boys, and I try to learn myself, is that our presence is more important than our production.
I think a lot of times we try to put our impact on the entire world so much higher, but we don't take into account the impact of the world around us. And we try to think grander scheme, and that's fine, but if we can make an impact for the circle around us, that's a lot bigger, it has a lot larger ripple effect than what we even realize.
The other piece that I thought was so powerful was where he says some mistakes we never stop paying for. And he's the vehemence and the anger, I should have seen it coming.
And see, it actually reminded me of The Patriot. How long do I have to pay for my sins?
Yeah. And
it was just, for me, that was just kind of a reoccurring theme, especially with men, because we do something wrong and we just automatically think that we're going to be paying for it forever, or there's going to be repercussions, or we fail to see God's love and forgiveness in that moment, and we end up beating ourselves up for years. In his time, season's almost over, so it's almost 17 years that he's literally beat the crap out of himself
chasing what he thought he wanted.
Well, putting his trust in something that was false. And, if we're being honest, we've all done it. It might not be some beautiful woman that we've seen on a train, but we put our trust, our faith in something else, and we continue to beat ourselves up nonstop instead of just accepting God's grace, his forgiveness, and moving forward and asking what he wants us to do that day.
Because what Roy ends up discovering, as his dad told him, it's not about your gift. It's not about the bat, but it's about who we are, not in spite of the wounds, but because of them.
That's good.
The wounds are what strengthen us. They're what sort of the wounds are the things that break away what's false to expose what's true.
And it's the wounds that God ends up using in the long run for us to impact others. For the past 3 or 4 years, you and I and a handful of others to talk about the ripple effect that we end up impacting on other people's lives. And I don't know, I think a lot of times we don't even stop to think about what the ripple effect for us actually looks like. You know, what is that kid that I mentored 10 years ago, what is he doing now? Like, how many people has he touched?
Yeah. Yeah, my wife, you know, I had stopped doing a podcast last year, but during that same time period, while I wasn't podcasting, I helped 3 different people start a podcast. And one of them was my wife. She does this nursing podcast called First Best Nurse. If you care about nursing, you can watch it. I'll do a plug for her. But she's now helped somebody to start their own podcast. So she's like, you're a grand podcaster. You're a grandfather podcast guy.
Old man.
And it's one of those things you don't know. You don't know the ripple effect. You don't know that what happened with that kid or the people that you see at work, that maybe they did a 1 degree shift, but that 1 degree shift at the moment actually canceled out a 50 degree shift that would have happened 2 steps from there.
And I think it's important whenever he said, I didn't even see it coming. I think we need to realize the fight is real, that we're not going to see the fight that's coming. We probably should, because the devil uses the exact same tricks every single time. But I think a lot of times his delivery is different, and just the delivery that keeps us on our guard, or catches us off guard, excuse me.
We get blindsided.
Exactly. And
it's a different movie, sorry.
We just, wow, that has happened. But, you know, we have to be ready. And he was ready to be taken out 100% before Ivers walked into that room. Like, he was going to stay in the hospital room and not enter back into the game. He was, okay, I'm done. Like, he won.
But he said, I wish Dad could have, like, he couldn't even finish it.
Yeah.
And I think in that moment, he remembered who he was. He's like, I love baseball. And so he ends up going he checks himself out of the hospital. He goes to the field. He has this big blow up with
the judge, Gus,
the triumvirate of evil and Memo. And he sort of he stands up to the evil, and I'll go ahead and play it. It's a condensed version because I cut it. There was a lot of spaces. It's a tremendous scene.
Well, this is what happens whenever you quit playing defense and you start taking offense. And instead of just waiting for the attack, you take the attack to the enemy.
Hey, Slugger, you okay?
I'm fine.
You look a little lost.
I'm not. You dropped this on your way out.
Something seems amiss.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Hobbs, but we had a deal.
Those are your winnings, Slugger.
This is a gag, Hobbs. Pick it up. Get out of here.
If it isn't enough money, tell us what you've got in mind.
To hit away.
I thought I could rely on your honor, Hobbs.
You're about to.
You're a foolish, foolish man. You've forgotten something. Your past.
I don't care. Go on. Get on the phone.
No, that won't be necessary. I like the action.
Then let it ride.
You bastard. I hate you. I hate you.
You were right, Memo. We have met before.
You know, you're a lot weaker than I thought. What do you think this changes?
Why don't you have Max draw you a picture? You can read about it in the morning paper.
You're yesterday's news, kid. You had a great gift of talent, but it's not enough. I think you're a loser.
In the words of Patrick Cran, that was a fantastic job of condensing 15 minutes into a very short amount of time.
And you see him understand who he is, and he shows up in strength. And that gunshot, Memo took a gun out of the judge's desk and shot it into the floor, and talks because he just took everything she wanted away. She had a life with him. She was going to escape, Gus's claws, his grip. She was going to get out of that circle, and he took that hope from her. And so, because he became useless to her, she hated him. She's like, you took it all away. And then he says, we met before because that was the same spirit Harriet had. That's all you wanted. That's all you'll ever be. It's not enough.
Yeah, I think it's great because he developed the balls to actually go against the enemy. And then all of a sudden he realized that he was being attacked from more than just one angle. He always just saw the judge as the enemy, but he didn't see the girl as the enemy, Gus as the enemy. People that he had trusted and potentially loved.
Yeah.
And I think the look of realization whenever he walked into the room and actually saw where it was, he wasn't overwhelmed. It was just, okay, now I actually realize what I'm dealing with.
Because I think he had that feeling, oh, I should have seen this coming.
And then the whole, whenever he told her, I met you before on the train, it was the exact same as if it was Harriet. Like, there was someone who I thought wanted my best intentions, had justified interest in me.
I liked her.
Yeah. And
she just wants to take me down.
She doesn't want, she has her best interest in mind, not mine.
Yeah.
Not ours in that instance, because at this point they had spent quite a bit of time together. And, you know, if it wasn't for Iris, I think that he probably would still see that as his future. Her as his future.
I was in a conference this weekend and with listening to Alan Arnold, and he was talking about our choices. He says every choice we make come out of, or they're either sourced from fear or from love. And fear can somehow turn into rage or anger or disappointment. It turns into a lot of things, but at its core, it's fear. And Roy found it very easy to listen to fear. Where am I? How am I going to pay? Am I going to be the best? Am I going to be remembered? All this stuff. Even, am I going to come through for Pop and the guys? They're depending on me. Versus love, which I think when we're listening to the voice of our Heavenly Father, is our identity. If we're listening to who we are and walking in that choice, then we walk in our strength, we walk in our identity. And in this case, it takes Roy down to see Pop right before the game starts.
You know, my mother told me I ought to be a farmer.
My dad wanted me to be a baseball player.
Well, you're better than anyone I ever had. And you're the best goddamn hitter I ever saw. Suit up.
That's great, because Pops had been fighting Hobbs's true identity the entire movie. And this is the first time he used his identity throughout half the movie. But this is the first time that he actually 100% embraced his identity. And, you know, he wanted the best for Pops after he talked to Red and figured out what was going on, and Pops's love for the game, love for the team. But to finally see an ally come along beside of you and actually speak into you and tell you who you are, affirming who you are.
Yeah.
And
it just takes one.
Yeah.
Just
and it was
one
great.
Voice.
You know, and he's sitting there shaving before the game and just, you know, just turns around. Just, where the hell have you been? Like, yeah. I've been waiting for you.
And so the game starts. They go back and forth. There's a lead. We get into the ninth. Roy has struck out every time. He's got no timing. His side is hurting. His stomach is hurting.
He's starting to bleed from where they took the bullet out.
Yeah. At this point, Iris, who's up in the stands with her son, obviously at least a middle teenager, for those who might be truly dense and like, who's the boy? Where did he come from?
Roughly 16 to 17 years old.
And she rushes. She's like, hey, he needs a letter. I need to get this to Roy. And right before he goes up to bat, he gets a letter saying that her son is also his son.
And then to see him pacing up and down the dugout, trying to comprehend it, like he just can't understand it. Like, Do you not remember the night before you went off for tryouts?
And so he comes up, it's the bottom of the ninth. There's 2 outs. And there's two men on base. So they're down 2.
And it's great because right before he goes up to bat, the judge is up in his box laughing at the team because, of course, the pitcher's in on it. So he's throwing the other team easy balls to knock out of the park. And you just see the enemy laughing at you failing in your calling.
Right. I told you you'd fail. Your gift wasn't enough.
Exactly.
And so what the letter showed, and what I think Roy realized in that moment, was there is something greater and more glorious than being a baseball player.
Yeah, if you were truly walking in what Christ has called you to walk in, you're not just fighting for yourself, but you're fighting for others. In this instance, he's fighting for his team, he's fighting for Iris, and he's fighting for a son to leave a legacy.
Yeah. The other part that I thought was interesting is we think of baseball even as a very solitary game. You know, you're at bat, you're against the pitcher. But in this case, Roy can't win the game by himself. If there's not 2 guys on base ahead of him who got there through hustle and heart, then he doesn't get the chance to come through in the clutch.
Whenever he got that letter, it kind of reminded me of the Patriot. You'll understand when you have a family of your own.
Yeah.
And it was that whole fighting for something bigger than yourself.
Yeah.
And I think this at bat 100% visualizes that statement.
So he goes up to bat, and they bring in a relief pitcher who is a Nebraska farm boy with blazing speed. This youngster has the best fastball in the league. It's who Roy was 16 years ago. And he has to face what he could have been. He has to face himself in that moment. And then he goes and the bat breaks. He breaks Wonder Boy. And that's when Bobby comes out. The bat boy is like, go pick me out a winner, Bobby. And Bobby brings him the bat that they worked on. Again, it's the inspiration and the influence that he had on the people that he was discounting.
But it was great because when Hobbs looked down at it, he was like, you couldn't have picked a better bat.
Yep.
This is perfect.
Yep. He goes out, hits the ball. It goes through the lights, fixtures, and
there was lightning strikes.
Yep. And they hit the home run. And the last scene of the movie is Roy back in the farm, throwing the ball with his son, with Iris in the field, and then it cut to black.
Yeah, it was a grain field. I think him and his dad was in a cornfield. I could be wrong. But I don't think there could have been a better ending because it was just him passing on a story, passing on a lineage, passing on a rite of passage almost. Just how something so simple, so pure could mean so much.
And I think the big question of this movie is, how will you be remembered?
Yeah, I've got nothing after that one. That was good. That was good.
And so the question for you guys and women who might be listening is, how will you be remembered? Will you be present with your families? Will you be present with your wives? Will you put the pencil down at 5 o'clock to be available? Will you put your phone down? Because I can tell my kids, don't bring the phone to the dinner table. But if I'm looking at it while we're at the dinner table, that sort of weakens the position. How much do you spend with them? Time. Because time is your most important. Time is the unreplaceable resource. You can spend money like crazy because it's just stuff. You're not getting time back. And so how will you be remembered? It's in the dailies, as Ricky mentioned earlier, about making those ripples, about interacting with the person who's in front of you, about leaving a legacy that's larger than us. And that can only really happen through God. We can try. Roy spent 16 years trying to make it to the big leagues. And then he did, and it wasn't because of his talent. It was because they thought he was a washed up hack. He made it because they thought he was nothing. But God used that circumstance to bring him around and to bring change and to bring hope.
How are you going to use the talents that God's naturally blessed you with to affect the people around you? His son idolized him without him even realizing that it was his father. The team around him joined around them and had a confidence in them that they didn't have several weeks, months before. How are you actually going to affect the world for better? Not grand scheme, because apparently, judging by this movie, if you just affect the 8 other people around you, you can make a huge difference.
Yeah. That's what that's about. It's about realizing there is something more glorious than being a famous baseball player who breaks records. It's by changing the lives of the people in front of you, inspiring them to be the best they can be.
He turned the worst team in the league to the best team in the league in the matter of a few weeks, just because he was walking in who he was.
Right. And it's not like he did it by himself. It took a team. As Roy kept saying, it's a team effort. It's a team game. We'll do it together. But it still takes a catalyst. It takes that lightning rod to inspire, to bring the people together, to believe in themselves. So this has been Paul McDonald and Ricky Furr talking about The Natural. And be sure to join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Play ball!
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?